Srimati Uma Mahadevan. Sometimes introducing a stalwart like Srimati Uma Mahadevan is introducing the sun and stars for people in Karnataka. And when I looked at what a magnificent person she is, which is abundant ability and potential, and very unique quality of always getting connected with people. When I look at someone like her, so we feel there are rays of hopes for us to bring changes and to build a society which we all want. It is really a pleasure. The Veda talks, the virtual talks on education and development, which brings stalwarts like Umaji to our fold to learn from them, from their experience, how we can really move forward. And this talk, we are focusing on sustainable development goals. Welcome, Srimati Uma Mahadevan, an eminent I.A.S. officer whom everyone who was working in the field of NGOs and disability and the government, Umaji is very well known. Recently, with the COVID, we see a very eminent, efficient driver who is really driving Karnataka to a COVID-free zone. Srimati Uma Mahadevan is a 1992 batch I.A.S. officer of Karnataka cadre who is currently serving as the Principal Secretary of Panchayat Raj in Rural Development. She holds a postgraduate degree in English literature and also authored multiple articles, publications covering socio-cultural and arts and discourses. I also remember in one of my conversations that she also had input on special education as well. Multiple responsibility leading to holistic experience. Umaji has served in multiple capacities at the central and the state. Prominent among them are as Principal Secretary in the Department of Agriculture, Education, Health and Family, and Women and Child Development. The picture really shows that she is a very well-known author and she has authored many books and many articles and papers and policy papers related to multiple issues. And I see her work in the area of women and their protection as one of the outstanding contribution to the country and also at the global level. Principal, as I said, she has been one of her favorite rural development Panchayat Raj secretary who has come with some spectacular vision where coming out with a circular, a guideline on inclusion of people with disabilities into mainstream development programs in Panchayat Raj. As I said, that as the COVID-19, she's one of the main champions for us to take it forward by engaging with NGOs and corporates, and which is very evident in Karnataka. And those who are working in COVID, we are all well aware of the leadership Umaji has taken in COVID management. As she's a journalist, she's a columnist, and some of her books are something like there are extraordinary 10 extraordinary I.A.S. career reviews, blazing powerful trails. This is something which is written by Rajini Shekhar Saibal. So if you really look at the whole issue about um the bureaucracy and women in bureaucracy, these are some of the outstanding stars we have who have really connected and so humble, and it is so easy for us to connect with Umaji. And when I was reading about it, It is really amazing that how a person of her caliber can stay so humble and always connected with people like us. Umaji also has served in the Department of Atomic Energy, Government of India, and Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. She was an active member of the working group who charted the Human Development Report. So this shows the versatile and diverse areas Umaji has focused, which really makes and brings her a very holistic knowledge and a holistic experience to all sectors, and including the sectors what I have seen in the area of women, in the area of disability. She has a very special vision. She guides the three-tier Panchayat Raj institutions, and as I said, some of the initiatives what Umaji has taken has become a good practice for the entire country, which has been shared even in United Nations as one of the good practices a state government has taken for inclusion of people with disabilities in the mainstream development programs. Inclusive change is possible with someone like Umaji in the driver's seat. We welcome Umaji for giving us, for having agreed to give the second Veda talk. And we really look forward to learn from you. And over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Indumati Rao, for the very, very kind introduction. I don't think I deserved all those kind words, but certainly feels good to be back with the stalwarts of the disability community and those working for inclusion for so many decades. I can see Dr. Rukmini Krishnaswamy here. Good evening, Rukmini ji. I can see Dr. Kairali Nair. Good evening, Kairali auntie, and many, many other friends who I have had the privilege to be associated with in my recent stint and also earlier in um, in the sector as Principal Secretary WCD, um, and hopefully continuing in these efforts in my current role as Principal Secretary Panchayat Raj and hopefully in future roles as well. Um, I would really like this to be more of an interactive talk, and therefore I will touch upon some points um, briefly, and then go on to the discussion, and we can have questions and in more of an interaction that point. Much of this, I'm sure, is already uh, known to all of you in great detail. So I apologize at the outset. I'll be repeating some of what all of you know for so many years, and some of what I tell you will be material which you all have worked on and made happen and made it a reality in India. But we are privileged that we have now reached a stage in India where we have moved on from the 1995 Act, and we now have a much more comprehensive act which will enable us to give shape to the aspiration and the vision of Article 41 of our Constitution. So I'll begin with that. I'll begin by reminding all of us, and it's worth reminding, that Article 41 of the Constitution mandates the state to make effective provisions to secure the right to education, the right to work, and the right to public assistance for people with disabilities within the circumstances of economic capacity and level of development of the state. Now, the non-inclusion of persons with disabilities in the development process, as we know, has multiple implications. Um, Disability, the stigma associated with it, the difficulties associated with it, result in loss of income, additional cost, mental stress, and other kinds of challenges to persons with disabilities, their care providers, other family members, leads to loss of education, leads to um, uh, a situation where their potential as individuals, as productive members of society, is not achieved. We should remember that India is a signatory to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, 2006. And to give effect to these principles, the RPWD Act 2016 was enacted, replacing the 1995 Act. We are happy, and as I said, it's a result of the work, consistent work and efforts and advocacy of many, many of you. Um, it now covers the 21 disabilities against 7 disabilities in the early act, with a provision to notify further disabilities. It increases the provision for reservation from 3 to 4% in government establishments for Group A and B, and for certain persons or classes of persons with benchmark disability. I may remind and share with those present here that Karnataka already had 3% reservation in Group A and B posts and 5% reservation in C and D. It envisages right to free education for every child with benchmark disability between the age group of 6 to 18. 5% reservation in allotment of agricultural land and housing in all the relevant schemes, poverty alleviation programs, and development schemes. Constitution, this is important. This 5% reservation in allotment of agricultural land and housing is important because we brought some of these again. Not only were they mentioned in the act, but we brought them in the 2018 budget speech of the Honorable Chief Minister of the state, thereby reiterating and sharing with the citizens of the state these commitments for reservation in employment as well as reservation in allotment of land and housing. Constitution of district level committees by the state governments to address local concerns of persons with disabilities, designation of special courts in each district to handle cases concerning violation of rights, setting up of the state advisory board on disability to serve as an apex policy making body at the state level, providing incentives within the limits of economic capacity to establishments to ensure that at least 5% of the workforce comprises persons with benchmark disability, constitution of a state fund for persons with disability, and additional thrust on activities like awareness campaigns, mobility, access to transport, grievance redressal, social audit of programs, and so on and so forth. Why I'm repeating this is because it's worth reminding ourselves that the Act provides not only for immediate oh, I'm sorry. I have to interrupt to say hello to Mrs. Indra Ramurthy. Good evening, Auntie. I just saw you there. Nice to see you. A very, very old friend from Bombay. Very emotional moment for me that you have also joined. It's important to remind ourselves that the Act provides not only for immediate reliefs, but also going forward. For example, and provides for a vision of work that all of us have to do in the community of activists and educators and administrators who care for this sector. The goals are very, very vast, and they are not only immediate. There are some immediate goals. For example, passing government orders, issuing a circular, ensuring that 5% of the development funds is earmarked for the welfare of those with disabilities and so on, are things that can be done overnight. But then constitution of special courts, evolving processes for these courts, coming up with a training program and a sensitization program, because now we're talking about 21 different types of disabilities, um, uh, understanding the ways in which different kinds of cases have to be treated. The cases of persons with disabilities may not be unilaterally only to do with disability, they may be intersectional. There may be, for example, a woman with a disability may be a victim of domestic violence, may be a victim of harassment in the workplace. There may be multiple angles. So there is a lot of work, layered work, which needs to be done in order to give effect to the promises enshrined in the Act. But the fact of the Act and the fact that these provisions already exist is very, very exciting. Apart from the above, the Act also contains a dedicated chapter for rights and entitlements, which include equality, non discrimination, community life, protection against inhuman treatment, protection from abuse, violence, exploitation, protection and safety in situations of risk, armed conflict, humanitarian emergencies, natural disasters. Again, this is an important area because when we often see disaster response, we have been living through a pandemic for 2 years, a pandemic which was declared a disaster, and we have been living through the impact of a natural disaster of the pandemic for the last 2 years. But such situations, as we know, always make those who are most vulnerable among us even more vulnerable to situations of abuse or discrimination or marginalization and so forth. And therefore, it's all the more important for us to draw up uh, standard operating procedures, to draw up training manuals, and to identify issues, identify uh, modes of responding in situations such as these, such as humanitarian emergencies and natural disasters. There are also provisions pertaining to reproductive rights, access to voting, access to justice, legal capacity, provision of guardianship, and so on. And the Act mandates the appropriate governments to frame schemes and programs in the areas of social security, healthcare, rehabilitation, research and development, culture, recreation, sporting activities, skill development, and so on for effective empowerment and inclusion of persons with disabilities. It practically lays open the entire range of human experience and assures persons with disability that they are not only welcome but they have a space, and they will be included within every aspect of human experience in our everyday lives. To make that a reality is something that all of us have to work for, starting with the rules. As you know, we worked a lot in my earlier tenure as principal secretary. Many of you were kind enough to be part of our expert committees and worked in our different groups, subgroups, on drafting the rules, because while we adopted the model rules for the state in the interim, we also felt that Karnataka's rules under the RPWD Act ought to be a lighthouse and a beacon for the entire country. We were finally able to notify the rules after a process. Uh, Now the time comes to actually give effect to many of the provisions in those rules. For example, limited guardianship, all of that. I'll touch upon some of the main points so that we're all on the same page. In the meantime, just to give some context, and I'll speak about Karnataka because it's an average state. It's large size state in India. So giving the example of Karnataka would in some sense apply to many other states. We have, as per the census 2011, we have around 13.24 lakh people with disability, which is around 4.94% of the total persons with disabilities in India. This pertains to 7 categories of disabilities. Of course, under the new Act, this provision of categories of disability has been expanded to include disabilities like dwarfism, muscular dystrophy, acid attack victims, autism spectrum disorders, and so on, and blood disorders. In Karnataka, what kind of directorate do we have? I'm happy to say and rather proud to say that Karnataka has always been a progressive state in the matter of working for the rights and empowerment of persons with disabilities. Even before the 1995 Act, I think it was in the 1980s, 1988, if I'm right. Some of you would be knowing. This was before I joined the service. But definitely sometime in the 1980s, that Karnataka set up a separate directorate for the empowerment of persons with disabilities and the welfare of senior citizens. So that was really an important step forward. This directorate is responsible for providing rehabilitation, education, economic opportunities, barrier-free environment, and so on, and other support. It's also responsible for promoting and maintaining the well-being of senior citizens by extending different kinds of support in terms of social security, healthcare, shelter, and so on, and protection against abuse and exploitation. The department is the Department of Women and Child Development, and the principal secretary of the department is assisted by the director at the state level. We also in Karnataka have a state commissioner under the RPWD Act who is responsible for the implementation of the RPWD Act and is assisted by the district disability welfare officers at the district level. Since 1998, we have an independent office of the State Commissioner for Persons with Disabilities, which is responsible for monitoring the implementation of the RPWD Act, monitoring the utilization of funds disbursed by the state government, safeguarding the rights and facilities made available to persons with disabilities, and of course, submitting reports to the central and state government on the implementation of the Act. Last and not least of all, to look into complaints relating to the deprivation of rights of the persons with disabilities. The State Commissioner also has the powers to inquire suo motu into any issues pertaining to deprivation of rights of persons with disabilities and safeguards available to them. And the State Commissioner has been taking up this role. Unfortunately, last year in February, the first State Commissioner completed his term. And thereafter, I think the process of selecting the new state commissioner is underway, and I'm sure that will be completed soon. This is broadly an introduction to the state mechanism in Karnataka. I should also mention that one of the challenges in different states for implementing programs for persons with disabilities, for the empowerment of persons with disabilities, is that these departments having been set up relatively recently, as for example in Karnataka it was set up in the 1980s, but many other states have set up their departments even more recently. So in Karnataka we have a director at the state level and a small directorate with a joint director and a deputy director. But at the district level, the only officer who's available with a small staff is the district disability welfare officer. Below the district in Karnataka, we have honorary staff who are at the taluk level called the multipurpose rehabilitation worker, the MRW, who is given an honorarium, and the VRWs at the Gram Panchayat level, the village rehabilitation worker. And similarly, in the urban wards, we have the special urban rehabilitation workers. These are all honorary workers. They are themselves persons with disability, and their work really is to mobilize, identify persons with disabilities, tell them about governmental programs, assist them with obtaining their disability certification, the assessment of their disability, getting their additional support from the government, maybe in terms of social security, in terms of particular schemes, educational assistance, and so on and so forth. So this is the structure of the disability directorate within the state. We also have so I don't have to go through the 21 different types of disability, but broadly, as we know, the Act has identified different kinds of disability. One is physical disability, which includes locomotor, visual, hearing, and speech and language. The second is intellectual disability, which includes SLD and autism spectrum disorder. The third is mental illness. Then there is chronic neurological conditions, then blood disorders, and then multiple disabilities. I'm happy to say that in Karnataka, the Chief Minister in the budget speech for 2018 also provided an announcement for conducting a survey, a specific survey of persons with disabilities. Because in 2011, when the census had happened, only 7 disabilities had been listed in the Act at the time. And the census in any case pertains to self-reporting of disabilities. But an actual survey with an assessment of persons and their different kinds of disabilities was actually envisaged, as mentioned in the Chief Minister's budget speech of 2018-19. Additionally, the Act, uh, Section 17A of the Act, as we all know, mandates that the appropriate government should also, along with local authorities, conduct a survey of school going children once in every 5 years to identify children with disabilities, ascertain their special needs, and the extent to which these are being met. This is one section which is especially important to me at the moment because in my current role as Principal Secretary Panchayat Raj, we carried out an entire house to house survey of children across 81 lakh families in rural Karnataka last year and identified different parameters about where these children are studying, whether it is in the Anganwadi or in the school, whether these children, this pertains to all children, including children with disabilities, and if they are children with disabilities or special needs, what kind of disability, and whether they need any support, whether they were already availing of any educational assistance or any other support from the government. This is important because, especially in rural areas, not so much in urban areas, but certainly in rural areas, this is a difference that the local body can make. As I always say, the local bodies in rural areas, as in the example of Kerala, have the ability to reach every person. Karnataka has 6,000 panchayats, gram panchayats, and each panchayat has a population of around 5 to 8,000. 5 to 8,000 is something like 1,500 to 2,000 families. It is entirely possible for a panchayat to make a difference by reaching out to children with special needs or with disabilities and help them to access whatever kind of support they need, whether it is in terms of obtaining their disability certificate, their assessment, whether it is in terms of rehabilitation, whether it is in terms of special care and support, vaccination. The most recent example was COVID vaccination, when Gram Panchayats in the whole of Karnataka organized enrollment drives to identify persons with disabilities, arrange for their registration on the CoWIN portal, organize transportation to take them. Before the door-to-door vaccination started, Gram Panchayats even organized transportation. And of course, all this was with the help of small and active civil society organizations on the ground. So it is not only the example, the wonderful example of Kerala's bud schools, of course, must be mentioned, but it is not only Kerala with the bud schools. Even in Karnataka, even in Odisha, in many other states, Gram Panchayats have done exemplary work and should be assisted and asked and encouraged to do more work for those with disabilities, especially for children with disabilities, because this is an area where they can really make a difference. So this is one thing that I wanted to say. Another thing is that, as we know, the unique ID for persons with disabilities. This is a scheme which was started a few years ago by Government of India. However, the scheme is obtaining the UDID card is not a trivial process. It requires shifting from the regular disability certificate issued by the state to the process of applying, enrolling for a UDID application, getting across to the experts for the assessment, ensuring that the assessment happens on time, and then based on the assessment, the generation of the UDID card, receiving that card at the address, at the home address of the person with disability or the child with disability. In this too, with great encouragement and support of the CEOs of the Zilla Panchayats, I'm happy to say that two districts in Karnataka, Ramnagara and Uttar Kannada, have already crossed 90, well ahead of 90% coverage. I think Ramnagara is almost at 100%. 6 more districts are between 70 and 80% and will soon move into 90% coverage. Karnataka is making progress. It's still some way to go, but the process has been streamlined in such a way that even where, to give you an example, the goals that we set, because this is a process where first the application has to be taken, the VRW has to take the application, ensure that this is done. We have enabled it at the Gram Panchayat itself, so that the application need not be done only in district level or taluk level, but can be done at the Gram Panchayat level itself. Thereafter, the fixing up of the appointment for the assessment, and actually supporting the person with disability or the applicant to be taken to the hospital, because this usually happens. We have also permitted, from RDPR, we have permitted Zilla Panchayat and Taluk Panchayat funds to be used in cases where necessary. For example, audiometry equipment. I think Ramnagar required it. And so they converged some funds using the 5% grants of their Zilla Panchayat in order to purchase audiometry equipment, so that persons requiring audiometry testing did not have to go outside the district. So our goals should always be in the direction of maximum convenience for the person with disability, so that we're not putting them to greater and greater difficulty. It's, to us as privileged people, it may seem not very difficult to go from, say, Ramnagara to Mysore or to Bangalore for an audiometry test, but it's an additional burden and an additional inconvenience. It's also a financial burden on persons who may not be able to take a day off, or parents having to go arrange transport, arrange a day off from their livelihood, and so on and so forth. And therefore, convergence, what I'm trying to say is really that convergence of these things is extremely important, and we have to constantly be looking at finding opportunities. Especially, I know that Dr. Indumati Rao has been working with districts like Ramnagara, Gadag, on preparing a comprehensive plan. Because if we have this equipment as near to the person's need as possible, we are making it an asset for that district. We are making it easier for people in rural areas to access smoothly their entitlements. And this will go on, because there will be more children who will require it, there will be more children who will require an assessment, and so on and so forth. It's not a one-time thing. So this is something that we have tried to enable, using, of course, the RDPR circular, but also working with CEOs to ensure that this is actually done. In Kolar, they tried to find funds. Similarly, I'm happy to say that they themselves came forward and said that we will find funds from the urban local body for this. We will use the urban local body funds for this. And so that was fine too. We're trying to ensure that UDID coverage improves. We are still, I think, somewhere at around 4 lakh certificates or ID cards having been generated. We have a long way to go. But this is being reviewed on a weekly basis. In rural areas, definitely, I'm able to review this. There is also the central scheme of scheme for promoting voluntary action for the disabled, which was later amended and renamed as the Deen Dayal Disabled Rehabilitation Scheme, aimed at creating an enabling environment where voluntary organizations were provided assistance to make available the whole range of services necessary for persons with disabilities to receive rehabilitation, including early intervention, development of daily living skills, education, and training. The District Disability Rehabilitation Center, DDRC scheme, is also being implemented and basically seeks to provide comprehensive services at the grassroots level by providing infrastructure and capacity. Both the DDRS and DDRC schemes, DDRCs typically are implemented in the district by an implement agency like the Red Cross or autonomous or semi-autonomous bodies. We have in Karnataka around 16 DDRCs, and I think there is tremendous scope for getting more DDRCs. We now have a new director disability, Ms. Lata Kumari, who I have briefed and who will be preparing proposals, more DDRCs to the state, also for converging and ensuring that the duties performed, the functions performed in the DDRCs can be streamlined so that they add value to the work already being done by the VRWs and MRWs instead of duplicating it. Because with such, to be very frank, in the disability sector, we are short of human resources. And therefore, it's extremely important to collectively give our suggestions on how the existing resources can be best used. And this has to be done in a very granular way. This too, I would request CBR Network and people like Dr. Indumati to help the sector with identifying how the DDRCs can be better used rather than just duplicating the services of the VRWs and MRWs to identify persons with disability. Another issue where we need to do more work is that even the existing schemes of the state government or the central government require far more information sharing, awareness, dissemination than is currently being done. The state government provides some amount of scholarships, but certainly the Government of India scholarships for children with disabilities are much more, they have a larger amount and uh, um, uh, much more helpful. And therefore, we are happy from the RDPR, it's an open offer that even the Gram Panchayats, as well as we have around 2,100 Gram Panchayat libraries, which already are equipped with computers. So we will be happy to lay these open for students with disabilities to come and apply for their Government of India certificates, scholarships of the Government of India, for which they have to make online applications. I know that this was being done through the education department, but very often the education department is already burdened with their other multiple responsibilities. And sometimes within the schools, if there isn't a computer space or computer timings are not available, it becomes difficult. But our RDPR libraries in Gram Panchayats, we have 2,100 which have computers, and these are available on Saturdays and Sundays. So this is also something which I'm happy to discuss bilaterally, if we can take that forward. And I'm happy to issue another circular to ensure we can issue a joint circular with Education Department so that DDPIs can ensure that all children who are eligible for this scholarship are encouraged to apply. It's also helpful for the state, apart from being very helpful for the children, because the amount given is more than what the state is currently offering. It's also helpful for the state because the scarce resources of the state can be augmented by the assistance coming from the center. This is also something that we can do. On limited guardianship, I know that I haven't directly mentioned the word Sustainable Development Goals yet. Let me tell you why. SDGs. Since I'm working on local governments and since I'm working on rural development and Panchayati Raj, I feel that everything we do in rural development and Panchayati Raj is every day about localizing the Sustainable Development Goals. Every day when we work on water scarcity, on water conservation, on providing livelihood to the poor through Mahatma Gandhi Narega, every day when we work on providing access, we have till now enabled 14 lakh children, rural children, to obtain free library cards. So again, this is localization of SDGs on education, localization of SDGs on gender, and therefore working through local governments is literally the localization of SDGs. And therefore, I thought that rather than coming up with a new paradigm, I would just tell you how we should automatically include. And similarly, I would say that along with localization of SDGs, inclusion should also become normalized as a practice, as an everyday practice, so that in the MGNREGA worksite, it is not surprising and not unusual to see that persons with disabilities are also included. And they are given the appropriate amount and the appropriate kind of work that is suited for them to be able to do. In the NRLM program, Rural Livelihood Program, women SAGs of women with disability should be taken as a routine and a normalized way, so that they are also provided the kind of appropriate training in order to flexibly use their time, provided the space, provided the skill set, and also the backward and forward linkages, so that they can also earn a livelihood just like any other women. I think normalization and localization of inclusion is absolutely the way to go, rather than accepting any form of patronizing or charity or any kind of condescending language. Inclusion is a right, it's an entitlement, and this is exactly the time to make it a part of our everyday approach to the way in which we treat our daily life. Similarly, I would say that all public buildings, till now we were saying we would make important public buildings accessible. But now we have said that every public building, I'm so happy when I travel in rural areas that I find Anganwadis. Anganwadis are having beautiful ramps with railing. They've started having toilets that are convenient to children with disabilities. So earlier when I started this special thrust, I would hear from some of my officers that, Madam, Nammalli, I'll just tell you in Kannada and then I'll translate. Nammalli yaru illa, child with disability illa Nammalli. I would say, they would say that we don't have at present any child with disability. But I would say, build it and then you will see. They are not there because you haven't built it yet. They're not there because you haven't put a ramp. You haven't put a toilet which is convenient for a child with a disability. You build it and then they will come out. They will come, they will become visible, and they will participate like other children. And that's what we have to do. This is not my own thinking. I saw it when I visited with a friend. I visited a low-cost private preschool in Mandya. It was amazing because this friend of mine, as a social entrepreneur, runs this as a way of giving back, runs a chain of low-cost private preschools. He said that an auto driver came to him and said that my daughter is blind. I want her to enroll in your preschool. So this friend of mine said that, we're not really equipped to give the kind of training that a child with visual impairment, a blind child, would require. So the auto driver said, no, I don't care. My daughter wants to be with her friends. I want you to enroll her in your preschool. And so they did. And the accommodations happened organically around the child. We often talk of accommodations as if it's a form of charity, as if it's a form of condescension or patronage. It's not. Accommodation is exactly what we do to help each other get through the business of daily life. If somebody is having a difficult day, we sit down with them and have a cup of tea. Why is that not a reasonable accommodation for that particular moment, right? And therefore, we need to normalize that accommodation is also a healthy and progressive and decent way of approaching everybody's needs according to everybody's specific requirements. This, again, is something that we're trying to push, not only in Anganwadis, but also of course, it's there in schools. We're also trying to do this in our libraries. We have a network of 5,600 rural libraries in Karnataka, in the Gram Panchayat. So what we did was, we said, first of all, that during COVID, children are cut off from schools and colleges. Let us have children's sections in all the libraries. Then we found that children needed membership cards, and we said, make it free, so that Gram Panchayat will pay the cost. And now we have, in the last 1 year, we have enrolled 14 lakh, 1.4 million children, rural children, free of cost. Then we said, why only children without specifying inclusion? What about inclusion? And then we said, let us make a beacon library in every taluk. So we said the beacon library will become, in every taluk, we have 233 taluks in Karnataka, and we said that we will have, this was also a budget speech announcement in the budget speech of the Honorable Chief Minister last year. We said that we will have one beacon library where the library will be fully accessible. It will not only have a ramp and a railing, but it will have proper, convenient toilet for persons with disabilities, users with disability, but it will also have computers with. So now when I travel and I see beacon libraries, I find that they are equipped with screen reader, with Sugamya, access to Sugamya Pustakalaya, and different kinds of aids and reading assistive material resources, which will enable students with disabilities to come and read. I was really happy to see this, first of all, in Ramnagara, where they have started enrolling blind readers and readers with low vision. But Kodagu, for example, tells me that within a few months, they will have 25 beacon libraries. Haveri already has some spectacular beacon libraries, and this is happening across the whole state and in every taluk. Where I gave a target of one per taluk, many of the CEOs have taken it forward, and they're doing many more. Ramnagara alone plans to have 25 beacon libraries. Hoddur Panchayat in Kodagu was the first one. And again, this did not come as my idea. I have to tell you, just like the idea about the parent, the blind child came from an auto driver who's a parent. Like that, this idea that we should have beacon libraries came from visiting Hoddur Panchayat in Kodagu, where the Panchayat president and members, as well as the Panchayat officer, an extraordinary Panchayat development officer called Abdullah, who's doing his PhD, he had created a beautiful digital library. But along with the digital library, he has created a toilet which is convenient for persons with disability. He has created a special desk in the Panchayat office for the village rehabilitation worker, which is really outstanding. She's a young lady. She has a disability herself. All our VRWs and MRWs are persons with disability, but he has created a desk for her so that if persons with disability people with disability come to the Panchayat, she is readily available with office hours so that they can consult her and take her support for anything. Similarly, a Panchayat in somewhere in Belgaum, on the border of the Khanapur forest, Nandgad Panchayat, has created a complete, they've taken a building which was not being used by the Panchayat, they have painted it, they've made it accessible, they have kept wheelchairs, they have kept carom boards, and they have made it into a disability resource center for all persons with disability, so that they can come in the evening, they can chat, they can discuss about livelihood. And this is not in the center of Bangalore. It is in a small Panchayat in somewhere in the border of Khanapur forest in Belagavi district. So I think when we talk about inclusion, we have to set ourselves very high goals, because the capacities and the willingness of people is far more than anything that we have imagined. So our imagination has to continuously go forward, because people's eagerness to help each other is actually the inspiration for the work that we do. It's not that only the disability community has to speak for ourselves. It's not that only our sector needs to speak for ourselves. The community as a whole is wanting to speak. There is an instinctive understanding of what inclusion means and the importance of inclusion and the value of creating these networks of solidarity and inclusion. I will touch upon some very brief points and then wind up so that we can have some questions. So as I said, localizing the SDGs to rural local bodies, this is my approach, and I would really love to hear from any or all of you, either today or even at a later date, how we can help to work further on localizing the SDGs in different aspects of the work that we do in panchayats. Under the 73rd Amendment and 11th Schedule to the Constitution, there are 29 subjects that are in the purview of the panchayats. These include Anganwadis, they include schools, animal husbandry, animal clinics, libraries, agriculture, horticulture, sericulture, so many other kinds of subjects. And in all these, we want to go with a paradigm of inclusion. The second thing is early intervention. As I've been WCD Principal Secretary twice, and this is a subject that's very close to my heart. We have 66,361 Anganwadis in the state. We are catering to 5.5 million children under the age of 6 and pregnant women and breastfeeding mothers. That's a huge, huge constituency. And using this constituency, using the 1.3 lakh Anganwadi workers and helpers and the 40,000 ASHA workers that are there in the state, we also have 1 lakh elected representatives at the local bodies in the panchayats. 1 lakh elected representatives, out of whom 50% are women. But I have to say, it's not only the women, even the men. So happy to say that even the men are so concerned, so many of them, when we talk about disability and inclusion, they are so willing to help. Just recently, I'm sorry I didn't make a PPT out of it, but I will share it with Indumati ji and maybe you can email it later. In Gadag, in one Gram Panchayat, the people realized that when specially able people or when people with disabilities come to the Panchayat, and if they have any work, they don't have a place to sit. So the elected members, Panchayat members, they contributed their honorarium. There is something called a Gaurav Dhana, which they get every month. They contributed their honorarium and they created a special park for persons with disabilities where they could sit while waiting for their panchayat work to get done. And this has not come out of any circular. It has not come out of any government order or any act. It has come purely out of the will and determination of people and their own feeling of solidarity. And this is exactly what we should build on. The other thing about early childhood, as Dr. Indumati knows, is that under the NEP, we need to come up with a new way of strategizing for early childhood care and education in our Anganwadis. This needs to necessarily be an inclusive approach. And this is something which is an opportunity. It's an opportunity not only for the disability community, but it's an opportunity for us to build a better world and for our children, and to teach our children that we need to live together, work together, support each other. So this is again something that we should do. In this, I feel that there is much that we can gain by training and orienting Ashas, Anganwadi workers, Anganwadi helpers, ANMs, but also parents. Bala Vikas Samitis in all of these 66,361. I'll just take 5 more minutes and then we can go to questions. I know that I've kind of exceeded the thing, but Bala Vikas Samitis are chaired by mothers. They also have other pregnant women breastfeeding mothers. They also have fathers in the committee. And there is always one grandmother in the committee. These Bala Vikas Samitis can be trained, oriented. We'll be happy to work with you all. On YouTube training, we have found that tremendous impact is there by training on YouTube Live. We get reach across the state, and the live chat tells us exactly how well they participate and understand the issues. Therefore, I think this can help us in a big way. We also need to look at antenatal care, childbirth screening within 48 hours of childbirth. Every child needs to be screened within 48 hours. This is something that we need to work with the health department, and RDPR will happily work together on this to ensure that every child is screened so that the required support for any child who needs it is provided at the right time as early as possible. I've already talked about physically equipped public buildings, ramps, railings, toilets that are convenient to use. But this should not be only in, say, Zilla Panchayat building. It should be in every Anganwadi, every school, every hostel. Today, the child may not be there. Tomorrow, you build the ramp, you build the convenient toilets, you build the tactile flooring, you put it into the design feature, and children will come. And we will see that we will be having a more diverse and inclusive generation of children studying in our institutions. Similarly, in libraries, I've already talked about the Beacon libraries. The RDPR circular, 5% grant with detailed guidelines. This is meant for use. I'm happy to share this. I think Indumati ji already has the Kannada version, as well as you were kind enough to get the English version. It was translated into English. Please use it. Those of you who work in the districts of Karnataka, please feel free to approach any of our CEOs, or you're free to contact me on using this in order to, because at the moment it's a circular, it's an instruction, but to actually make it come alive, we need all of you to come and give us ideas and put pressure on us to make sure that this happens on the ground as well. Because when this 5% of funds in RDPR itself be calculated, it comes to around 160 crores as a whole, 5%. And therefore, when the 5% of funds is used carefully and in a systematic way, we can really start making our urban and rural public spaces truly accessible. Just think how wonderful that would be. Think how different everything would look, and how marvelous it would actually become. VRWs, MRWs, and URWs, they themselves are community-based workers, and they are persons with disabilities. DDWs, the District Disabled Welfare Officers. These are a small group. This is the small army that we have in the disability sector. We need your help to train them. And I would request each one of you who represent different categories of disability, please train, orient, and sensitize them so that they have a granular understanding. They have a detailed understanding of what are the issues, what is the support required, what are the support systems available, and can anything further be done within the district? Do they have to go out of the district? All of these things, because you will find that there will be champions in surprising spaces who will come forward to support and make these things happen. Therefore, the more we train, the more we orient, the more it's an investment in actually creating this as a better and more inclusive world. I also think we should talk a lot about mobility solutions for persons with disabilities, for VRWs, MRWs themselves, but also for the community as a whole. Persons with disabilities need not be restricted to a place. We should think Bangalore is the city of startups. There are people working on different kind of electric vehicles. There are people working on exoskeletons. So we should really think about mobility. I know that exoskeleton, for example, will be it's an expensive solution, but there are startups that are working on it. Can we think of innovative ways of financing some of these? Can we start talking to, say, the Board of Construction Workers Welfare? So the exoskeleton can be used for persons with spinal cord injuries, but can we think of financing it from these are conversations that we should start having. We should also orient, maybe we should talk to some of these startups and talk to the Department of ITBT to have hackathons on what else we can do. How can we leapfrog and move forward with better and better aids and assistive devices for persons with disabilities? Because even in the use of smartphones, there's a presentation that we had 2 years ago. The use of smartphones can really transform so much. We are using speech to text and text to speech software to help some of our panchayat members who may not have attained literacy. They may be illiterate, but speech to text and text to speech can help them to access information of what is happening in the panchayat decisions. Can we not use similar techniques, even in smartphones, even in other devices, in order to help persons with disabilities in our state? I really feel that if we start asking these questions, Karnataka can become a beacon and a lighthouse for other states, not only for other states, but for this region in the world. Not only in India, but for the region in the world itself. We should talk about ways in which tax exemptions or reimbursements can be given for the use of for vehicles, because we want persons with disabilities, children with disabilities, to become mobile. We want them to be able to freely use public spaces, enter public buildings, go where they want, because only when everybody is able to use these public spaces. So therefore we need to look at whether tax reimbursements can be done. Then we need to get into, it should not become a way of others who don't have disabilities to misuse these provisions. Therefore we need to get into intricacies of policy design and see how we can come up with good robust solutions in partnership with concerned departments. We can talk to transport department, things like that. We should look at schemes of other states so that we share information and share knowledge across states. Tamil Nadu may have something, or Kerala may have something good. Can we quickly get translations done? So the disability community should really start talking across state borders and translate things into small little bullet points so that we can start doing more advocacy in a more systematic way. And we don't have to burn the same energy in order to reinvent the wheel. We should actually keep building on each other's success and keep asking, because the will is always there. The will is always there. I have rarely encountered any negativity when it comes to talking about disability. And therefore, we should build on this. COVID vaccination was a good example, as I've already said, of the ways in which Gram Panchayat task forces have helped persons with disabilities to be identified, to be provided relief, to be provided transport, and so on. We should continue to build on this model to ensure that as and when persons with disability require either health assistance or assessment or support with UDID, we should institutionalize this practice. And I'm happy to issue a circular to this effect from the RDPR. Definitely we will do this, and Indumathy ji, we can talk about it and we can draft something and issue it. We should look at, in the Gram Panchayats, can we think of, I've already talked about disability resource centers. This is not only in Belgavi but in other panchayats. But can we also start thinking about special parks, mixed ability parks? One is coming up in Bal Bhavan, Bangalore. We also want it to come up in districts. I have suggested that Bal Bhavans in the whole state, every district Bal Bhavan should be completely accessible. It should have signage. It should have, accessible features, barrier-free toilets, everything, so that children with disabilities can use the Bal Bhavan as much as other children, and families can come there as a way to spend an evening. The Kerala Bud centers I've already talked about. Yes, Karnataka also has 2 budget announcements for a disability campus and a special educators training institute. I really think states should look at, RCI is one institution, but we really need to build institutional capacity within the state, in Karnataka and in other states. And I think in Karnataka, we have so many experts and so many institutes. We have NIMHANS, we have All India Institute, we have tremendous institute, Chandrasekhar Institute, we have Rukminiji's Spastic Society. We have wonderful institutions and NGOs and individuals working in Karnataka. And we need to build an alliance where we can actually start talking about respite care, short-term training certificates for parents. We can talk to NIMHANS. Parents themselves, once their children start growing up and require less of their intensive need, parents themselves who have received training can become trainers for others and can pay it forward and carry forward this, so that we're always constantly building larger concentric circles of solidarity and support. Education, I think we should talk a lot to education departments and schools and colleges about reasonable accommodations. It's now the time to start going with detailed, very, very granular list saying that dyslexic child requires this. Destigmatize, conduct anti-bullying session, conduct regular counseling, Nothing wrong. No child should feel afraid of being labeled. Every child is labeled in one way or the other. What is there? More we normalize, more it becomes easy for the child to obtain the required support. All children learn in different ways, and every single way is okay. And we should go there with a very strong advocacy framework to institutions to insist on this, because this is important. I remember one of the directors, former directors of NIMHANS, told me that, every time there is a child in a government school who whose mother, who's performing badly in academics, but the mother will come and tell you, I'm so surprised, my child is so smart, he's so brilliant in everything, he's always picking things apart and fixing it together and all. This director told me, you must get that child screened for SLD, and teachers must be given a complete training. Government school teachers, high school teachers must be given complete orientation, not just special educators, not just the BIRTs, but the every single teacher. Because in countries like Finland, before the child reaches 12th grade, one out of every two children is identified with a specific learning issue, and that's perfectly fine. In a family of four people, in a family of four children, two children may have SLDs, and that's perfectly fine. They receive the support that they need. And that's the attitude that we need to build. And we need to just keep on at it, not aggressively, but relentlessly, persistently, tirelessly, as all of you know, much more than me. You all have been doing it all these years. I think we need to, as I said, work on removing stigma, improve advocacy, parent outreach. We need to talk to parents of children who are recently identified. We need to build networks among parents, build networks among teachers, identify teachers who are champions of children with special needs, and work on using them to train others and reach out to others, because everybody likes to hear from experts in their own community, and they are more receptive also, and therefore we'll be building ripples of capability. We need to do teacher sensitization and training. We need to talk to non-teaching staff in schools, maybe bus drivers, maybe because learning happens everywhere, and wherever learning is happening, children are ragging each other, they may be bullying each other, but we need to the more we do a simple training and an orientation, we will be removing one bit of stigma each time we do a training. We need to train wardens of hostels, other staff of hostels, because it's so easy. There'll be a group of 5 children and you'll give them some problems to solve. And there'll be one child who will be looking around and struggling. Why should that child feel embarrassed? Therefore, a bit of training and a bit of screening and a bit of orientation will tell people exactly how they need to respond. Higher education. I think higher education, our goal should not end with Standard 10. Our goal should not end with National Institute of Open Schooling. We should keep our goals higher and higher. We should keep our goals till PhD. We should go to foreign education. Our children should be able to study what they want and where they want. And therefore, we need to advocate with higher education institutes also. We need to build and demand centers for inclusion in large universities. Many universities have it. Unfortunately, many universities do not have it. A center for inclusion is an essential thing in any institute of higher education. And this is something that we should ask for, and we should assist. We should go with pre-designed, we should go with a proposal which people cannot say no to. We should say, this is what you have to do. We'll make it easy for you. We'll work pro bono. We'll help you with it. But you should not say no to this. So making it easier for people to say yes, making it harder for them to say no. This is something that I feel is a good approach to follow. We should also look at mentorship. There are so many children who grow up and succeed. There are so many who succeed with all sorts of different challenges. They are our champions, and they need to mentor others. They need to pay it forward. They can do it in terms of a small little video, a small little message which can be shared, which inspires people when they're facing difficulties. This is important. Livelihoods, of course. I've already spoken about training and self-help groups for women, but I think we should also look at building groups of young people who can provide affordable care for those who require it. Not everybody can afford expensive carers to come in every day. There are parents who need to go out for work, but they need to keep somebody, pay somebody to look after their child, maybe an adult child, maybe whatever. And we need to provide a training for affordable care, which is also reliable care. And can take care of basic needs. We should also look at whether we can ask for preferential purchase support. This is a policy decision, but we should think through this, and I'll be happy to have a conversation on this. BPOs, KPOs, we should look at different kinds of organizations where our young people can find jobs and livelihoods that work for them, because they also bring skills to the table. And we should talk to organizations, corporates which actually are already working on this, and ask them in detail to tell us what are the skills you need, what kind of training you need, what can we provide to our young people, so that our young people can be a good fit for your requirements. That conversation needs to happen. And finally, I think it's extremely important for civil society organizations, research and training institutes. I think we already have the Disability NGOs Alliance, but we need to do more. We need to network across disabilities, both in specific disabilities, categories of disabilities, but also cross-cutting. And we need to organize regular monthly forums to discuss and share on what is possible, what are the gains that have been recently achieved, and what can we take forward. These are, I think, things that will really help all of us to build a better and more inclusive society for the generation to come. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry I've exceeded my time, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Good evening, Secretary Ma'am.
Thank you, madam. I request everyone to think about what questions we need to ask a stalwart like Umaji, because I have worked at different levels, but this is one talk which is so specific, with a long-term vision, something which is very doable. Based on Umaji's talk, we are going to prepare a vision plan and share it with everyone. She has covered everything. She has touched every aspect of human life. This is something amazing talk that we are very fortunate, Umaji. And it's like an encyclopedia of disability. You have touched every bit. And the two mantras, what you said about normalization and localization of SDG goals, is what we are all going to work towards it. Because that is the way out, and with the inclusion being embedded into it, we can achieve a lot. So I really request participants, because this is going to be recorded and it is going to be available at the global level on our International Resource Center on Inclusivity and CVR web portal. So I request each one of you to ask one question at a time, so that it is recorded correctly, and only when Umaji answers, then the other person can ask another question. So now over to who is going to take the first opportunity. Please raise your hand. So I think Jayashree Ramesh. Jayashree Ramesh, yeah.
Yeah. Good evening, ma'am. And Indumati ma'am, I need to first congratulate you for organizing this talk. I think, like you said, this has been one of the most motivating talks that I have heard in a long, long time. And I'm really enthused, actually. I mean, it's great. It happened on a Monday. The whole week will now kick off very well. She's covered everything. I have just one quick question. I know we have a very dynamic director that she mentioned with us, and I just met her. We need to work on this. I have just one question on UDID. Is UDID going to give us the correct data right from the panchayat as to the number of persons with disabilities, as well as the type of disabilities? Because she also mentioned that she'll not be able to work much if if there's not enough data available as to what is the kind of disabilities, and how we going to plan if we don't have the correct numbers. So I just want to know, is there any way we can work on this to make sure we get correct data on the number of people with disabilities in Karnataka?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. I'm glad you asked that. UDID at the moment is working on transferring all of the current existing identified persons with disabilities and including them in the system. This is the number that the CCPD has given to the UDID database. And therefore, it's extremely important that the survey of the persons with disabilities happens simultaneously so that those who are, but before the survey, there needs to be an extensive IEC, as I said, of training because new disabilities, new categories of disabilities need to be actually explained to VRWs, MRWs, and all the other stakeholders, to panchayats as well, so that the survey, instead of being a house to house survey, can actually become a kind of a register where people come and self register for this so that all those who have been left out of the currently identified list of persons with disabilities can also be included thereafter. So that process has to happen. As of now, the UDID data is likely to be limited to those who have already been included within the system.
Thank you, madam. I think we are already working in the government state of Karnataka to look at disability registers and linking with the census. When Umaji was with the WCD, we have already worked a lot on that, and that can. That I think that is going to be another pioneering attempt in Karnataka, like counting the people. It is not head counting, but identifying them and identifying their needs and inclusion. Together, all three has to go. And Ratna Prabhakar, you have a question? Yeah, please. Please.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Congratulations
Yeah, please go ahead.
to you, ma'am. People as stakeholders in inclusive society is very much appreciated. However, the access to public domain is still limited. So, and one more thing is for domestic violence, I would like to say that fast track courts are very important, ma'am. If you could think of that, otherwise you covered the whole thing as a life cycle approach for them.
Thank you. That's very true. The provision for the courts is already in the rules, and I think the department is in the process of activating both limited guardianship, fast track courts, different parts of the rules which have already been notified will now have to be activated. And I think that process is underway. Definitely, that's an important part of ensuring that rights are actually affected on the ground and they're able to claim their rights.
Next one is Prashant Sharma. Prashant, please go ahead with your question.
Hi, I'm audible.
Yeah,
Hello.
you are audible.
Yes.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Ma'am, I just want to have some counseling session over here. I just want to. I'm being a differently abled. I'm using a prosthetic. Uh, I just need advices, मतलब, how to do a preparation for the civil service or like how to uh, go against that battle.
You mean preparation for exams? Is that what you're
Yes, ma'am.
talking about? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So the Department Directorate of Disabilities already has a program called Spardha Chetana, and
Okay.
Spardha Chetana is a kind of a preparation and orientation program. I would request
Okay.
you and encourage you to contact the Director Disabilities, Ms. Lata Kumari, who will be able to give
Okay.
you more information and for Spardha Chetana program.
Okay. Ma'am, I just noted down the things that I have from the सेशन मैंने कुछ सेशन में से कुछ चीजें आप सुनी जो मैंने लिख ली तो मैम एक एक्ोस्केलेटन होना चाहिए स्पाइनल कॉर्ड इंजरी के लिए तो मैम रिसेंटली हमने देखा है कि लाइक इन फॉरेन स्टेट्स में एक ऐसे एक्ोस्केलेटन बनने लगे हैं जो इलेक्ट्रिक एनर्जी से मैकेनिकल एनर्जी में ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन हो जाएंगे जिससे उनको काफी फायदा हुआ ऐसा सेम एम्पिटीज डिसेबिलिटी सेक्टर में भी हो रहा है कि जो एम्पिटीज है उनके लिए भी वो चीज जैसे राइट नाउ आई एम यूजिंग अ प्रोस्थेटिक लिम्ब तो वो उस टाइम तो आई थिंक प्रोस्थेटिक लेग्स के लिए भी हमें मैम वो इंश्योरेंस और वो टैक्स फ्री वो नहीं मिलता जो इट्स हमें वो हाईली एडवांस प्रोस्थेटिक लेग वो नहीं मिल पाते जो हम स्पोर्ट्स में यूज कर लें। तो ऐसा कुछ चाहिए कि I can easily have that resources which can help in Paralympic Games and as well. Uh,
So I think you've raised a very important point. The design and manufacture of exoskeleton, as far as I know of one startup in Karnataka which is working on this. It's in an early stage and approvals. I think FDA approval by the Indian regulators and so on are in the process. But I think it's important, and maybe the Disability NGOs Alliance, I think Mr. Baswaraj from DNA is here. DNA could maybe organize, or similar forum could organize some conversation between startups, designers, and the needs of specific needs of persons with disabilities, so that the technology and the design actually is very closely matched to the specific needs, especially because the needs of those in a low resource, or in a situation like developing countries will be very different. The conditions in developing countries are very different from the conditions in the West, and therefore designing for local conditions also requires an understanding of the needs of local persons with disabilities. This kind of conversation could be very useful.
Thank you, madam. Shanti, you want to ask a question? Yeah. Shanti? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, good evening. This is Shanti Satish here. Ma'am, I just had a suggestion to make. It's like, would it be also good to have incubation centers for entrepreneurship for people with disabilities? So that would also help us to bridge the gap of getting employability somewhere. And also it would be much more sustainable as we look out for other people. So that will also contribute towards inclusion, and when we look at a broader way in terms of NEP.
Absolutely. Nice to see you here.
Thank
And
you, ma'am.
definitely that's an important element, and one should further develop the idea, maybe
Yes,
develop
ma'am.
a concept note which can be socialized with the concerned departments, education department and higher education and so on, and thereafter discussed to see what is feasible. That's an excellent idea, and I think Bangalore is just the right kind of place where
Absolutely.
such a project could be taken up.
Sure,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Since we are running short of time, I would. I have a question. In 2 days ago, Prime Minister called for using technology in health, and there was a discussion on telemedicine and telerehabilitation in Ayushman Bharat. And as you said, we have a severe shortage of trained professionals in rural areas. So tele-rehab could be the way for us to reach people. And if we can build a robust tele-rehab system in Karnataka, we'll be able to reach a large number of people, which is one of the major needs to have the basic rehabilitation, and with connecting with experts available for handful anyway. So, what is your take on that?
I think that's absolutely the way to go. We have seen during COVID that it's important to reach people, and during COVID in a crisis, we could take up intensive programs like Vaidyaranade Halli Kade, which means doctors going to the villages. That's not efficient or feasible in normal times. Therefore, what we did, and during COVID, I don't know if Indumati ji, whether you're aware of it, we USAID and KHPT in partnership, funding from USAID and partnership with KHPT. In Karnataka, we took up in 2,800 panchayats. We took up Gram Panchayat based health screening. This screening is for non-communicable diseases, hypertension, diabetes, but also for tuberculosis, mental health issues, and anemia, nutritional status, and some one or two other things. Idea of doing this was to decentralize so that the poor person, or a person who's unable to go for whatever reason, poor person, bedridden person, person who is unable to does not have the mobility, does not have to go to the PHC, but the device can come to the person along with a trained person who can carry out the test, whether it is, blood sugar or blood pressure or anemia or whatever. So as part of this, we are taking forward, I'm going to Chamarajanagar later this week, we are discussing whether we can do now home-based primary care for those who are unable to come for whatever reason, who are ill, who are bedridden, etc. In Chamarajanagar, we are going to take up a pilot in 6 PHCs with 6 panchayats. Panchayats actually are the community and they have to form the bridge between the person who needs the care and the PHC which can provide the care. And therefore, low-cost telemedicine for tele-rehabilitation is automatically and naturally the organic next step forward. And I'd be happy to discuss further. We can discuss bilaterally later this week or next week about how we can try such a pilot on this.
Thank you, madam. Thank you. Thank you for the great. Now we have come to the end of it. I welcome all of you.
I think Dr. Rukmini has a question. Can we just...
Rukmini, yes. Rukmini.
Half a minute. See, Dr. Uma, I tell you, one of the best communication I have heard in years. Best communication I have heard in years. And I think you have covered quite a few points. And I just have only one thing which I have to say. We have to have many seminars, interactive sessions, and so on and so forth on inclusion should become normalized. I think this is the key thing which has got into my head. So that is one thing. And another thing is how to link this with certification from NIMHANS and other institutions. And I think we combine these two, the subject, that is inclusion should become normalized to some of this and certification. I think it will have more value and I think it can be taken forward. Thanks a lot for these ideas. I will take more time. Thank you so much, Indumati.
Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. I totally agree.
I take this opportunity. I request everyone to visit the Inclusion Bharat, the International Resource Center on Inclusive Education and Community-Based Rehabilitation. It is a single window portal for all these problems and information you need on disability. So kindly visit. And now I request Mr. Basuraj to give the vote of thanks to Marji.
Yeah. Ma'am, thank you so much for an excellent presentation. And also, I think you gave us a very, very comprehensive roadmap for us. And it came out so well. I think those of us, very well, know that the kind of a depth you talked and the kind of, direction we need to go. It's a very much, guiding tool for us. We would certainly like to work with you, ma'am. And thank you so much for your time, for your guidance, and your continued support to disability sector. I must say that you're always being a champion of disability sector, and every opportunity wherever you are, whether you are in our own WC department or any other department, you always ensure that disabled people's needs and requirements are being met in the form of circulars, in the form of directions, and in the form of influencing. And I think it's a great opportunity for Karnataka to have officers like you, and we are very honored. Thank you so much to you, and of course for all your guidance. So on behalf of Indumati Rao ma'am and of us for disability sector, we thank you very much, ma'am, for this comprehensive support, and we look forward to your continued guidance and support in the days to come.
Ma'am, I need to ask.
V.E.D.A Talks has been one of the very much a comprehensive program. So all over the world, people will listen, and I'm sure, like you said, Karnataka become a regional center for a disability because we have an excellent support system and an excellent work that is being done. So with your guidance, we'll be able to do a lot more in the days to come. Thank you so much. Thank you also, Mr. Swami, and also Dr. Indumati Rao and all others for your presence and all your support to take this work forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, madam. We have people from Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladeshis and who are all here
Hello.
in this session. We are all going to get benefit. Prashant Sharma, I know that many of us may have more questions to ask Umaji, but since we have the time limit for this session, and I have copied the email ID here, so please send, you will definitely pass it on to Umaji and you will hear from her. So thank you very much, and we are closing the session. And thanks everyone. Thanks Rukmini.
Thank you.
Umaji, for in spite of, I know that you had a hectic day, so in spite of that, another 1.5 hours is a real say drain on the energy, but amazing energy levels. So our prayers are for your health and for your energy, and we are all with you. And we'll really look forward to take all these ideas, which are very doable, which are very specific, which are really achievable, and we are all going to work towards it. Thank you.
Ma'am,
Thank you.
ma'am,
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
I need to speak more with the ma'am. Hello.
Yeah, I really request if you have questions, suggestions, please send an email. I will take it to Umaji. So because this is a session, we have time. It's a time bound.